Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about my favorite shipped designs. It's a fun Friday. I want to answer a question from Toastman Dennis 1218 who asked, "Could you please make the same format video with your ideas that were accepted, made it into your games, and you are happy they did?" This was on my video of my ideas that got rejected, which I'll link below. By the way, this video has a lot of videos in it, and I'll link them all below. I won't always be able to give all the context. This might be a long video. I won't always be able to give all the context for all the design ideas I've worked on, but there's a ton of videos associated with this video that will give you a lot of background on them. So before I dive into my list, though, of things I designed that went into my game that I really liked, I'm going to limit it in two ways. Because what would be a Tim Kaine story video without caveats at the beginning? The first way I'm going to limit it is I'm going to limit it to the games where I had the final say, meaning I was the game director, design director, lead designer, whatever. So that limits me down to 4 games: Fallout, Arcanum, Temple, and The Outer Worlds. In all the other games I did, I have designs in there, but someone else had final say on what actually went in, and in many cases my ideas were modified, which leads me to the second thing I'm going to put a caveat on. It is hard to come up with credit. I have a whole video about why credits are hard to give to people, because sometimes when you mean who did that, you mean who had the original idea, and then it was who figured out how to make that idea implementable, and then it was who implemented it, and then who got all the bugs out of it, who optimized it. There's usually a chain of people responsible for any feature that you like in a game. I'm going to limit myself to talking about ideas that I designed, and in many cases, coded. And even when I didn't, kept a tight hand on how the feature was going in. So these are all things that I can point to myself and go, that's mine. I don't want to take credit for ideas other people came up with that I edited or implemented, or that I came up with an idea and it was radically changed by the time it went into the game. So, also I will throw out call outs to the other videos, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Just there's a list in the description you can go look at. So let's start with Fallout. There's a bunch of things in Fallout that are me, that I really like, that we shipped with. One of them is luck. Chris Taylor came up with the Specia system, which was the attribute special strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, and agility. I added luck to it. I have a whole video linked below on why I did that, but I'm really glad I did, because I'm glad that there exists an attribute that isn't a clear-cut, this is how good you are with people, and this is how fast you move, and this is how strong you are. It's just luck. It's just out there. It's like a mystery attribute. However, having said that, if I were to do a luck-like thing today, I would probably make it a perk, and make the levels a lot stronger and more obvious. And I might even put in the opposite, a flaw, so you can get, rather than put critical misses in a game, put in a flaw where now you can critical miss. But I'll talk about flaws when I get to Outer Worlds. Another thing that was my idea in Fallout, which seems weird to talk about in 2025 when a billion other games do this, but when I did this in Fallout, I didn't know of any other games that did this. This was me. That was that I had multiple quest solutions, and that specifically for the main story quests, I demanded combat, stealth, and dialogue solutions. To the, frustration of some of the designers, because frequently I'd see a main story quest in the game, and I'm like, how do I talk my way past that? How do I sneak past that? And there wasn't a way. They left it out, because combat's the easiest one, and you usually think combat, and then occasionally people are like, well, maybe I can talk to him, or maybe I have a key and I can just sneak around him. But they had to have all 3. And that was a big thing back then. I let side quests slide, but that back then, being able to play that, the main story in all those different ways, is why so many characters are viable and fun in Fallout. And then related to that was dumb dialogue. I have a whole video on where the idea of that came from. It's from one of my original high school D&D campaigns. I really, really wanted it in Fallout. I pushed for it, even though that meant the narrative designers had to write extra stuff to support dumb dialogue. But we really liked it. And it ended up going into Arcanum and Outer Worlds. I love dumb dialogue. I think it's a really cool feature. You don't see it in a lot of other games even now. And I think it's cool. And it's related to why I like flawed characters. If you're going to take your IQ stat and run it down to the lowest value, I want you to be constantly reminded of that when you talk to people. And I want the people talking to you to remind you of that. Another thing we did on Fallout that was my idea, and even on the implementation as well, were the customized end slides. In fact, I have a whole video on how that was implemented. This predates achievements, so we had to put in a lot of tracking variables for end slides. But later on in games, if you're doing achievements, end slides can just follow from that because it's pretty much the same batch of variables. But back when we made Fallout, the idea of having some slides at the end or an endgame cinematic that was tailored to not only the character you built, but actions you took during the game was unheard of. I can't think of a single game that did it. This is something I thought of that I wanted, and I wanted it because of all the tabletop games that I played in high school, in college, in grad school, and at Interplay. Had wildly different experiences with different groups of people playing through the exact same adventure. And I wanted that to come through in Fallout. And I think we did a really good job at that. Before I go on to the next one, I was going to talk about Radiation, but we had an original design for Radiation, and I was having trouble implementing it, and all I did is suggest that it work very similar to Poison and Drugs and other things that were in Fallout. I do have an entire Radiation design that maybe I'll talk about one day that I really love because it fit with the whole Fallout theme. I don't want to get into it any more than that, but I had a Radiation design for the original Fallout that I absolutely adored that didn't make it in. But it also didn't get rejected because I never suggested it because we just did not have time. And I say that as the person implementing Radiation, I knew I didn't have time. I had to make it go in using the same system as Drugs and Poison and everything else and then move on. So let's move on ourselves to Arcanum. Arcanum had a bunch of things in it too that were my idea that we shipped with. Arcanum backgrounds, where when you're creating a character, you can decide his history or her history, and it gives you some bonuses and penalties into your character. I wanted those. I loved them. Again, I'd never seen anything really quite like it in a computer RPG, but everybody who plays tabletop RPGs usually comes up with their character background, like I was an orphan, or I was raised by wolves, or I was found abandoned in the Temple of Cthulhu. Interesting. Why can't we do that in a computer game? So that's why that went in there. I have a whole video on like what even my favorite backgrounds are. Another thing in Arcanum that I loved was skill training, which was orthogonal to buying up skill ranks. Skill ranks made you better in whatever that skill directly affected. For example, a bow skill, putting points in a bow skill made you shoot an arrow from a bow more accurately. But the training lets you do things like, I do more damage with an arrow, or I can shoot 2 arrows at once, or I don't take range penalties, so I can shoot someone as far away as easily as someone who's standing right next to me. What I really loved about those in Arcanum was the way you got ranks. You went up level, you got some points, you could spend those on skill ranks, but the way you got training is you had to go find trainers. And trainers charged you money. They were a great money sink. And they often, especially for the high level training, gave you quests that you had to do. So it really rooted it all in the world. You weren't just putting a point in something and like, hey, I can shoot 2 arrows at once. No, you had to go to that expert trainer, beg them to teach you how to do it, pay them, go on a quest for them, do things for them, grovel to get your training. Some other things I put in Arcanum that I liked, the scripts. I'm going to call out the scripting system as a feature because it's really cool for modding. So it's something end users do see. I have a video on Arcanum scripts. I mentioned it when I did an event system video too, because the way the scripts are implemented in Arcanum is it's basically lets the modder intercept events. When you get hit, when you get critically hit, when you get hurt, when you pick up an item, when you drop an item, when you die. when you get healed. All those things can be intercepted and prevented, or when they actually happen, something else can occur. So those are pretty cool. I also like the procedural terrain generation system we created. So every time you play Arcanum, all the sectors that weren't made by hand are procedurally generated. So the game is always a little bit different. I love that. There's a whole video on how I did that below. Similarly, the generated dialogue in Arcanum, I love that because it, first of all, let us make a lot more dialogue with a lot fewer people. It let us have much more reactivity, especially in greetings. The greetings had like 10 different things that they checked. Like what you were wearing, what time of day it was, whether they had seen you before, what their social class were is it a shopkeeper talking to you? Is it a noblewoman? Is it a guard? I loved it. Doesn't play nicely with VO, but I love generated dialogue. There's a video about that. And then the last thing that I love that I got into Arcanum is every single thing that you can choose in the character creation of a character in that game affected the game. Everything. Your race, your gender, every attribute, every skill, every magic spell, every tech schematic. Even your name mattered. Because I said the name was part of the random number generator used to generate things in the game. So I was super happy about that because it literally meant there was absolutely nothing you did in the character generator that didn't matter somewhere in the game. I would defy you to find me a game even today that can make that claim. Because remember, you can set your name in Arcanum. So let's go on to Temple. There's only a few things in Temple that I think I actually got in the shipping version. And the reason for that is Temple was the only game I made where the setting, the story, and the system mechanics were all provided. You know, it was Temple of Elemental Weevil, the module, in the Greyhawk setting using D&D 3.5. However, I still got a few things put in there. One of them was the party alignment system, which was the idea that you selected a party alignment, and then you could only have characters that were within one step of that alignment. That was how we prevented you from having an assassin and a paladin in the same party, or a monk with a chaotic character because they were too far away. The other thing I got in there related to the party alignment were the opening vignettes. And yes, I wish we had had more time to do these, but the opening vignettes were based on the party alignment. So after you picked your party alignment, it gave you an opening to the game, which was different depending on what you had selected for your party alignment. And what I loved about that is it's the perfect complement to customized end slides. It's not a customized ending, it's a customized opening. It's, hey, your characters, like your chaotic neutral characters, they were just bumming around in a dungeon and they found a treasure map. Oh, your lawful good characters, they accepted their liege's request to go to Hamlet and investigate. Totally different. It started you off in a different vignette. When you got to Hamlet, you had a different starting quest. You may be going to talk to a particular person. I loved it. I thought it was pretty cool. And that brings me to my last game, Outer Worlds. And I'm just going to mention the flaw system. I really liked flaws. I have a whole video on how flaws evolved, why I like flawed characters. I will say that the original design for flaws I liked better, but time and money. The original design was after you picked your flaw, you selected from a set of perks that were related to the flaw. So like if you got damaged by a lot of robots and it offered you robophobia, which made your attributes drop when you're in the presence of robots, it also may make you run faster because you're terrified. And there will be other perks that you could only pick if you got that flaw, which is really cool because it made the flaws way more interesting and attractive. Because if you don't take that flaw, you will never be able to get that specific perk. Anyway, because of all this I just said, this is what leads me to say frequently when I'm talking to designers that if you want to know Designer Tim, there is more of me in Fallout and Arcanum than any of my other games. To a lesser extent, there's me in Temple and Outer Worlds, but not as much as Fallout and Arcanum because I had way more of my ideas directly put into the game, and often I was the one implementing them too, so they went in exactly how I wanted them to be. Anyway, I hope this answers your question. Toastman Dennis.